Libertines are people like Casanova, Marquis de Sade. These are people who lived in France in the 1700s. They came from families of money and means, but in France, only the oldest son would inherit the land and would inherit all of the resources. The younger sons, he might get a little something on the side. He's not going to get the house. He's not going to get the land. They're going to give him a small amount of money, not enough to become a married man in this sort of made patriarch by their terms. As a result, the libertine was born. He was a man who went around having sex with many different women, often married women, to mock the institution of marriage, the one institution that he couldn't participate in. So he mocked it through having a bunch of different women, sowing his seeds, and sowing his oats indefinitely, because he was in a state of arrested development. When we see these guys that we call young, hyper-masculine males today in America, they're showing a very similar type of gender performance, but they're being looked at very differently. We romanticize the libertine, we made him a Harlequin romance type figure, and that's the role of race, that's the role of class that's operating, and how we look at these two very, really similar performances. But race, like I said, life, social class, these things are very much impacting how we view those things. When we talk about something like hip-hop, hip-hop is linked to urban African-American male culture, but over half the people consuming hip-hop are young white males. Again, there's a lot of parallels between what both are aspiring to do. Black males are used as a sort of a facade, as a front for this, and putting distance between the performances that white males are doing. And it's the black males that get all this flack for the very same aspiration or whatever. But there's a lot of parallels there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What is LHN? What is that?
Life history. I'm sorry, life history narratives.
Narratives?
Yeah, they're life history narratives. Yeah, I would ask men about their lives, and they would tell me their stories. And I asked them to tell me your story as a book, and we divide into chapters. What that chapter be called. So these are the chapters we call their lives: virgin, no more during adolescence, or girls beginning of manhood in my 10th years. All the young men during that early life stage development as teenagers. Those were the type of titles they gave me. Okay. But the titles evolved and they changed into more mature orientations as they got older. Okay. Their titles in their lives took on very different meanings as they got older. So that's part of their life stage development. When we focus on street corner men and this and that, we're getting almost, let's say, a sort of arrested development. And we get a one-dimensional aspect of what black masculinity is. And if the men themselves cannot move away from being on the economic margins, they themselves may experience this sort of arrested state of development too. So I'm not going to say it's just one side and it's only the media paint them this way. They may experience these things too if they're not able to improve their position in life at some level. Or if they haven't gotten into a committed relationship with a woman and have found a way to just manage the fact that maybe she's the primary breadwinner and he's there helping to manage the family household. And that happens too. Which brings me to this idea of what I call nuanced masculinities, which is going back to what Dutton was saying, that masculinity is something that's very malleable. And this deals with the men's evolved relationships, which was shown to have a reforming effect on men's gender performances. And I call these nuanced masculinities. And these gender representations, they do not espouse patriarchy, but rather they evoke a more egalitarian coexistence between the men and the women, reflecting these men's personal maturation. Likewise, becoming a father had a similar maturing effect on the men, and that was very revealing in the narratives that they gave about what fatherhood meant to them. Now we'll get into that shortly. So, facts that contribute to nuanced masculinities. Let's talk about that. The facts that contribute to nuanced masculinities for men in my dissertation research, it was when they talked about having met the right woman, someone with whom you can develop a long-term relationship with. That was a big part of helping them to mature because they helped keep them grounded. They were a sounding board. They kept them honest in a lot of ways. This idea of getting into long-term relationships, we know that's very significant when it comes to birth outcomes and the outcome of a child in general. Children who have a steady presence with a father, if the male figure, the father figure is constantly in that relationship, the children tend to have a much better outcome. But children who have, there's different, like a revolving door, different men that are taking on that role, those kids have a much different outcome than a person that has that one constant, And sometimes it's not even a father, but it can be an uncle, but having a constant figure, male figure in that child's life is a very stabilizing force for the child. But the opposite would have a very not so good effect. We know that personal development was a big part of helping these men get nuanced. We achieve nuanced masculinity. Men who were middle-aged in their 40s that I interviewed in both studies showed a lot of this sort of nuanced masculinity. But I should also say that it was young males that also revealed these nuanced masculinities at times too. And it was most revealed when they were talking about their domestic aspirations as family men, when they showed this sort of nuanced masculinity for the younger men. And I'm going to, give you some examples of what these nuanced masculinities look like. And I'm going to give you it's a longer text, but it's an example of what I'm talking about. This is Jason in my dissertation research, and this is what he had to say. Jason was in his mid-40s when he talked to me. He had to work as an outreach worker in a community-based organization. But he says in years, and he's a guy in recovery too. He's been clean from heroin use for about 15 years now. And he's married with about 4 kids with his wife. He says, and this is his second marriage too. In years past, I might interpret certain things as being soft or feminine or acting like a sissy. What we used to call being real is no longer real, like being hard. It's changed and I'm able to be more sensitive, being more secure with myself, not always feeling like I have to have a certain persona about myself. Now I'm able to ask for help in areas that a lot of people don't think a man should ask for help for. Like I'm able to tell my wife that she is right. So that was a point of growth for Jason.
That's great.
Yeah, he was quick to say that, Because his wife took a double take when he said it, too. So he's showing his growth. And then I'm going to give you a case of William. William's another guy in my discussion research. He was in his 40s, too. He worked for one of the big 3 auto industry. He worked as a team leader. He's been married for the first time for about 18, 20 years to his wife. She's on her second marriage, and they have 2 sons together. They have twins. But his response was, my thought on what it means to be a man has changed over time. There's an aspect of being responsible that has changed. Before being responsible meant taking charge. Now being responsible, as I understand it, means being responsible for your own actions regarding the treatment of other people and the things around you. It's being more sensitive to those around you as opposed to just taking charge. Trying to prove how much of a man you are through toughness doesn't mean a thing if people around you, referring to his wife and children, are not willing to come to you for help. So again, help was a part of it for William. Yes, he has to show a softer side of himself so that his family can come to him for help. And Jason's able to admit that he needs help sometimes. And he can tell his wife that, hey, honey, you're right or whatever. So yeah, these are men that were being reflective as they matured and they stepped away from their original orientation of manhood that were tied to more of a public display and more traditional patriarchy. Because they got older again, they didn't feel the need to rely so heavily on those things. And it was those long-term commitments that in some ways were getting these men there too. So this deals with what Patricia Hill Collins talks about, this idea of uncoupling strength from dominance, that we shouldn't confuse strength with dominance, it's important, And William gives an example when he talks about his father. He says, my daddy fixed everything around the house. He took me and my older brothers to events. He's a caregiver. He took care of us. So I found it really interesting that he chose the word caregiver to describe his father. That's a term that we think of nurturing, we think of motherhood, but he called his father a caregiver, the way he cared for them. He still was a manly man, but just him being active in his children's life, he saw his father as a caregiver. He talks about, watching the fireworks or, taking the fireworks on the 4th of July and sitting along the side of the freeway with their sparklers and just watching the cars go by and things like that, or going to go out with his dad. But the times he spent with his father was very precious to William. William's father was an alcoholic. And William's father and William's mother had a lot of fights over his father's alcoholism. He said when he was 11 years old, his father walked out the house for the last time and didn't come back. And he had walked out on his life. He didn't see his father again until he was a grown man. And his father was saying, I'd already been around. I was there for graduations. I wasn't in sight, but me and your mother both agreed from the state he was in that I shouldn't be publicly around you. I chose to be behind the scenes, but I was always following you all along. So that connection helped William deal with the fact that throughout his adolescence, Daddy was there for him. And he made a point to say that he would never be that way with his kids. He was going to always be there for his kids, his 2 sons, his wife. He worked at an auto industry, so on Fridays he would drink with the guys a lot too. He got part of blue-collar culture. You do a lot of drinking. That's part of how you sort of display your confidence as a factory man. You go out on Fridays, you drink with the guys. So he engaged